of world-renowned designers to think about what would happen at the garden. In the past 2 months, I've had the rare pleasure to spend a couple of days with Madi in his Marsha and Bates Lee Asian garden, and I thank him very much for allowing me to observe his creative process. It's been a real pleasure. So, Sandra?
Well, we've got a series of really exciting programs coming up this year, and it's all as a result of the input that you all gave last April when we did the survey. And here to kick off our season is one of the world's leading authorities on both tropical design and the cultures of Southeast Asia. Designer and author Madi Wijaya has been delighting us with his books and gardens for the past 30 years. He's best known for his romantic Balinese garden designs and for his books and films on the architecture and the culture of Bali. His resort gardens are particularly famous, beginning with his first at the legendary Bali Aberjah. Here in Naples, he is the designer, as you know, of the Asian garden at the Naples Botanical Garden that is opening this week. Born Michael White in Sydney, Australia, he arrived in Bali in 1973, having jumped ship and swam ashore in a rainstorm. Oh, just wait, there's more. A student of architecture, he first of all intended the visit as a short break from his studies, but his fascination with Bali's rich culture and tradition led him to move in with a Brahmin family in South Bali. After various jobs teaching tennis, English, working as a tourist guide and photojournalist, he began contributing to guidebooks before being asked to design the gardens of the legendary Bali Aberjah. More than 600 gardens later, Madi is a world-renowned tropical garden designer whose company, PT Wijaya Tribhuwana International, has a 500-strong team of artisans and garden commandos, as he calls them. He's written only 8 books on architecture and landscape design, including Tropical Garden Design, which has sold over 100,000 copies, Modern Tropical Garden Design, and The Best of Stranger in Paradise, The Diary of an Expatriate in Bali. His most recent residential project was featured in the August 2010 issue of Architectural Digest, and I want to tell you, it was fabulous. So today his presentation, which he calls the Romantic Charm Landscape Design Movement, an antidote to post-Zen depression. He told me that it's bland minimalism is the fashion in urban house design. And in the tropical world, this fad has swept into the garden too. So his lecture is a hitchhiker's guide back to artful naturalism. Please join me in welcoming our renowned guest, Madi Wijaya.
Is that on, Larry? Hello, testing. And if we could leave the lights on just for 5 minutes while I do an introduction. I didn't know who Liz was when she first appeared at the Gardens last visit, and there was very polite, not a pushover, but a very polite lady, taking lots of notes, and I was amazed to find out what a powerhouse she is. And I'm not surprised to learn that she's now in charge of the crowd control. And we talked about this on the way to the we talked about this on the way to the venue today, and I said, well, crowd control, what are you looking at, like men kissing each other in front of the Holy Father or something, like a flash mob? Now, this cheeky little minx then said, more like a hot flush mob, she said. But I had an epiphany at 4 a.m. in the morning, because I've given this lecture quite a bit. And I just think it's important that you pitch the direction, the style of the lecture to one's audience. And this being a very American audience, I wrote that when one looks at the beautiful gardens of Connecticut, one thinks of England and the fabulous artful, natural landscape traditions of the 17th and 18th century in particular. When one looks at the Spanish and mission gardens of Santa Barbara and Montecito and even Los Angeles, one thinks of the Andalusian Moorish influences descended from the ancient gardens of Persia and perhaps even ancient Egypt. Many of the suburban gardens of Seattle bring to mind the great Japanese garden traditions. But it's in the tropical gardens in America, the Balinese gardens in the shopping malls, the exuberant English parkland hotel gardens of Hawaii, and the cutting-edge New Asia gardens of the smart new tropical hotels in Miami and the Caribbean, that one only has a sort of murky or sort of mysterious idea of the provenance. I hope that this lecture today on the evolution of the Southeast Asian garden, and the themes as mentioned by Sondra, will educate you about the background of the Balinese garden, and then you will go and hopefully see the garden I've created with the wonderful team at the Naples Botanical Garden, and you'll understand it more. I've got to direct it at the computer. Oh, go back one. Now this is possibly I've traveled a lot around Southeast Asia. I was a guide on a marine tourism vessel, and we stopped at all the beautiful islands of eastern Indonesia. And the people of the Pacific, the Polynesians, don't really realize that they are from Indonesia originally. The ancient Indonesians, if you want to know what an ancient Indonesian garden looks like, you really just need to go to, say, sort of Hawaii or to Fiji, or into the eastern extremes of Indonesia near East Timor. And this extraordinary temple of the seven winds, each one of these big stones represents one of the wind directions, and those incredible trees that are shaped like clouds is sort of the most ancient of Indonesian gardens. There's no idea of architecture or form. It's just a place of worship, a ceremonial ground. But it is a primeval Asian garden. People tend to think of Asian gardens as being like Rousseau, very luxuriant, verdant, fecund. But in fact, the real Asian garden, tropical or otherwise, is something quite Spartan. Oh. Now, I went to Hawaii, to the place where my ancestor, Captain Cook, murdered a few natives and destroyed most of the local culture. There is a wonderful place there called the City of Refuge, which is the Hawaiians' own Alcatraz. And it survives today as a series of walls, of basalt, I think lava stone walls. And it brings the idea of landscape architecture into the fore. Now, one imagines that the very ancient Indonesian gardens also had these walled compounds to protect from the wildebeest and the tsunamis and et cetera, but really it's only in the Pacific that one finds these. There's a famous submerged one, I think, in Tonga. But the idea of these walls is terribly important. There's one out near Rattlesnake Hammock, and the entrance to a large complex I saw. The Terrace Sanctuary is another staple of the ancient Asian garden. This is a village in Flores, which means flower. The Portuguese came to East Indonesia, Francis Xavier, introducing Catholicism and basketball at the same time. And most of these traditional villages were raised, but quite a few survived. And here we see the example of the raised chompangs that you find in the middle of Asian villages, tropical Asian villages. We're really confining this garden and the lecture to tropical Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. So really, even in Nepal and northeast India and down through Burma and right through Java and Sumatra and East Indonesia, Vietnam, the ancient villages all have this idea of the tree of life on the platform. And the platform was where the chieftains would sit and have powwows, where they'd park important, I think dolmens they're called, someone correct me if it's a manir, which commemorates an important feast or a death or a coronation. Now the Chinese, the South Chinese, and the Indonesian people swept down from Yunnan in South China. Their landscape traditions were more architectural, they were more sculptural, they were more sophisticated. And they had these wonderful tea gardens, and this is in the Erhai Lake near Dali in Yunnan, which is the plateau of the Eternal Spring. And as you can see, it's already quite ornate, quite structured, the idea of tables and chairs, balustrades. And at the Asian garden, I've done a sort of a bit of a nod to that in what I call the Vietnam patio.